Obina was one of the richest men in the region, his name whispered with admiration in business circles, envied by peers, and praised by his people. He owned estates, factories, cars with foreign plates, and war suits tailored in Milan. Yet, with all that wealth, Obina was a man imprisoned by doubt. He had built an empire, but had no idea if the people around him truly loved him more, simply loved what he gave them. At the center of his heartache was his wife, Amara. She was beautiful, elegant, and intelligent. But over the years, something changed. Her laughter no longer reached her eyes. Her affection grew cold, mechanical. Obina began to wonder, if he lost everything today, would she still stand by his side? That question haunted him. So one night, while sitting in his private study, surrounded by walls of imported books and the soft ticking of a gold-plated clock, Obina made a decision that would change everything. He would fake his downfall. He would walk away from his riches, disappear from the world he knew, and return as a poor man. Not for revenge, not for drama, but for truth. Obina called his most trusted lawyer and friend, Chief Dyke. "I want you to prepare a statement," he said. "Tell the world my businesses have collapsed. Freeze all accounts under my name. Let my disappearance seem sudden, irreversible." Chief Dyke looked at him in disbelief. But why? Obina stared at the fire, burning low in the hearth. "Because I need to know who truly loves me. Before I die, never knowing." And so, within days, headlines spread like wildfire. Obina Okafor declared bankrupt after mysterious collapse. Multi-billionaire vanishes. Assets frozen. Wife left shocked. The media buzzed. Socialites whispered. Politicians who once begged for his time deleted his number. Inside his mansion, Amara sat quietly, clutching her phone, surrounded by silence. Meanwhile, Obina, now dressed in worn-out clothes and dusty sandals, walked out of the back gate of his estate carrying nothing but a small bag, a prepaid phone, and a heart heavy with hope and fear. He rented a tiny room in a rundown area on the edge of the village. A place where nobody would recognize him. The roof leaked when it rained, and rats scurried across the floor at night, but he didn't care. He watched. He waited, and he listened. Within the first week, he walked past a group of old friends on the street. They glanced at him, then looked away. One of them even laughed. "He looks like that beggar from behind the market." One said. Obina said nothing. His disguise was working now. It was time to see what his wife would do, and so, every morning, he sat across the road from his old mansion, beneath a mango tree, pretending to be just another hungry man. What he saw next would begin to break his heart. From his quiet spot beneath the mango tree, Obina watched the life he once knew unfold without him. On the third day after the public news of his downfall, Amara stepped out of the mansion gates. No makeup, no jewelry, no driver. Her eyes were red, her lips trembling. She stood in the sun for several minutes, clutching her phone, before turning and walking slowly down the road. Obina watched her go, feeling a painful knot twist in his chest. She looked broken. But it didn't last. By the seventh day, Amara appeared in a new outfit. Simple, but clean. Her face held no more tears. Her shoulders were straighter. She started making visits into the city, once with a cousin, then alone. And by the second week, Obina saw her laughing. Not just smiling, but laughing. Beside another man, the man was well-dressed, tall, handsome. He stepped out of a black Mercedes, opened the door for her like a gentleman, and the two entered a restaurant together. Obina sat still, unmoving. That evening, he returned to his tiny room and sat in the darkness. She didn't even wait. "Month," he muttered. But it didn't stop there. The very next day, he walked through the village market, head bowed, passing by familiar faces. No one greeted him, not even his younger cousin. who once begged for a job in Obina's company, glanced in his direction. He stood in front of his uncle's stall where he used to drop sacks of rice and cartons of cooking oil each month. The man looked him up and down. "You should go to the church," he said flatly. "Maybe someone there will help you." Obina said nothing. He had expected some of this, but the coldness pierced deeper than he imagined. On the 15th day, he stood outside his old estate again, watching. The man with the Mercedes returned, this time helping Amara carry shopping bags inside. Was she? Moving on? So soon. And then came the final blow. Obina's younger brother, Chuka, whom he had made a co-signatory to part of his land, was seen with a surveyor in town laughing, holding papers. A curious conversation revealed the truth. Chuka had sold 2 plots of Obina's farmland, and not once had he come looking for his brother. Obina's heart shattered further. His own blood. Everything was becoming clear. The friends, the family, the laughter, they had been tied to his wealth. Not to him. He had wanted answers. Now he had them. But just as his spirit sank into silence, something unexpected happened. Late one night, while walking near the market in the shadows, he heard a soft voice. "Obina." He turned. A young man approached, tall, slim, wearing a faded shirt. It was Ifeni, his childhood friend from the village. "I thought it was you," he said gently. "You've changed, but not your eyes." Obina looked away. "I don't need pity. I'm not here to pity you," Ifeni said. "Huh? I'm here to feed you." He opened a paper bag and handed Obina a hot meat pie and a bottle of water. "No. One else came looking for me," Obina whispered. "Ifeny." I smiled. "That's because they were looking for your money. I came looking for my friend." And for the first time in weeks, Obina smiled. Not because he had everything, but because he now knew who mattered. The days grew hotter, and so did the pain in Obina's heart. Every morning, he returned to his mango tree not because he wanted to, but because he had to know how far the betrayal would go. What he saw each time was like adding salt to an open wound. Amara had changed. She no longer wore the quiet sadness from before. Now she wore bright colors again. She laughed easily, wore new dresses, and was frequently seen with the wealthy businessman who had begun to visit her. Obina learned. His name was a Mika City investor who smelled opportunity in the aftermath of Obina's downfall. He helped Amara settle a few pending bills, offered her transport to events, and slowly made himself comfortable around the estate. One afternoon, Obina followed from a distance and watched as Amara introduced Amika to her friends. She called him a kind soul sent by God. Obina clenched his fists, hidden in a crowd, as people cheered. No one remembered the man who built the very walls they now stood in. Later that same day, he returned to the small alley behind the estate, where a group of former workers were laughing over palm wine. Obina was smart, one said, but look at him now. He thought money made him untouchable. I heard even his wife is planning to remarry, another chuckled. Women don't wait anymore. Not when the food stops coming, said a third. Obina stood just a few steps away. Hidden in shadow, listening to every word, his heart felt heavy. But something inside him began to shift. Not pain, resolve. He could see the full truth now. The masks had fallen. His wealth had bought him friends, family respect, admiration, but it had not bought him love. He had walked away from his fortune for answers, and now he had them. One rainy evening, as thunder rolled above the village, Obina sat outside a makeshift shelter with Ifeni, the only one who had remained by his side. You've suffered enough, Ifeni said. When will you tell the world who you are? Obina didn't answer right away. Instead, he looked up at the sky and said, Not yet. I need to see one more thing. I need to see what Amara does when she thinks she has one. That moment came quicker than expected. A few days later, word spread like wildfire. Amara and Emeka were hosting a private celebration. The rumors said it was for an engagement. Obinna, now almost invisible to everyone in the village, slipped in with the crowd and watched from behind a food stall. Laughter rang through the air. Decorations shimmered. Eka stood tall in a silver suit. Amara, dressed in a rich blue wrapper, stood beside him smiling. A pastor arrived. People clapped, and as the introduction ceremony began, Obinna stepped back into the shadows. He had seen enough. This wasn't just betrayal. This was a performance, and she was starring in it. But there was one final twist still hidden in this tale, a truth even Obinna had not yet uncovered. Obinna stayed away from the village center for 3 days, not because he was weak, but because he was thinking. The engagement celebration had confirmed his fears, but something still felt unfinished. Why had Amara moved on so quickly? Had she seemed so bold in public? Why had she never once visited the places they once shared: his office, his private garden, the chapel where they wed? On the 4th morning, Ifeanyi arrived at Obinna's door. "She's coming here," he said. Obinna frowned. "Who?" "Amara." Confused and cautious, Obinna stepped out and hid behind the wall of a nearby hut. And sure enough, there she was. No makeup, no fancy clothes, no Emeka. She looked around carefully and then sat down on the very mango tree stump Obinna used to rest on. She held something in her hands, a letter, and she began to speak softly. To no one visible. "If you're here, Obinna. If you're alive, I know you're watching." Obinna froze. "I knew you were pretending," she continued. "I knew the collapse wasn't real. I saw the way you sat outside the mansion. I saw your eyes. I could never forget them." Tears welled in her eyes. "I played along. Not because I stopped loving you, because I wanted you to come back. I wanted you to feel what it was like to be ignored, used, abandoned. I wanted you to see what your silence did to me." She held up the letter. "I wrote this the day after you disappeared. I never mailed it. I didn't need to. Because I knew you'd read it one day." Obinna's heart pounded. "I wanted to make you speak, but instead you let it drag on. You watched me fall apart and never came. You punished me for your fear." Her voice broke. "And now you've seen everything. So if you still believe I never loved you, walk away. I won't chase you again." She placed the letter at the base of the tree and walked away without turning back. Obinna stood, motionless. The silence was deafening. He walked forward and picked up the letter with trembling fingers. Inside was the truth he hadn't expected. Amara had known from the beginning. She had never truly betrayed him. She was testing him too, trying to make him confront himself, trying to make him feel not me. And I sat down and wept, not because he had been wrong, but because he had allowed his doubt to destroy what had once been pure. And now he had to decide. Would he return to her, or let pride bury everything? The sun rose gently the next morning, golden light spilling across the village like a second chance. Obinna stood at the village square, no longer in rags. He wore a clean white shirt, simple trousers, and his hair neatly trimmed. For the first time in weeks, he didn't hide. He stood tall, calm, ready. Word spread like wildfire. The beggar is Obinna, the billionaire. No, it can't be. By midday, the town square was full. Curious neighbors, former workers, old friends, and even those who had mocked him now stood in stunned silence as Obinna walked into the crowd. And then Amara arrived. She pushed through the people slowly, her hands shaking, her eyes wide with disbelief. When she saw him standing there, alive, exposed her legs gave out, and she fell to her knees. "Obina," her voice cracked. "You came back." He walked toward her slowly, his eyes locked with hers. Everyone waited in tense silence, and then he knelt beside her, tears welled in his eyes. "I was afraid," he whispered. "I didn't trust anyone, not even you. I thought you loved my name, not my soul." Amara shook her head. "I loved the man who sang to me in the rain, who built a life from nothing, who knew how to be tender without needing applause. I saw you at the tree," he said. "I read your letter." A tear rolled down her cheek. "I only wanted you to see what I felt. I wanted you to speak. I wanted you to come home." They embraced in front of everyone, and for the first time in a long time. The village cheered not for his wealth, but for something far rare: redemption. Obina stood and raised his hand. "I was tested, and so were you. Many of you failed. But I forgive you." He turned to his brother Chuka. "You sold my land, you sold my name. But I pray you never sell your soul again." Chuka lowered his head in shame. Obina faced the crowd one last time. "I now know the truth. True wealth is not money, it is love, loyalty, and the hearts that remain when everything else is gone." That afternoon, a small celebration was held at the riverbank where Obina and Amara had once gone for picnics. No gold, no diamonds, just food, music, and peace. Children danced. Elders blessed the couple. Friends returned not for money, but for love reborn. Obina didn't rebuild the mansion right away. Instead, he chose to stay among the people for a while to relearn what mattered, to teach his story as a living lesson, and every evening, he would sit by the mango tree with Amara beside him, her head resting on his shoulder. Because sometimes you have to lose everything to find out who truly never left. Thank you for watching this powerful African life lesson story. Billionaire pretends to be poor to test his family. What his wife did broke his heart. If this story touched your soul, please like the video, share your thoughts in the comments, subscribe for more African folktales and emotional life stories. Share this story with someone who needs to remember what love really means. Till next time, remember, real love doesn't chase fortune, it stays when all fortune is gone.